I am going to be, should I show some red? No, no. Hey everyone, hi, welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to be talking about the worst books that I read in 2024. Is it appropriate to say that I'm excited to share with you? But I'm excited to share with you. If you're new here, then my name is Shelly and I really love books and reading. And I am excited to go hard, or maybe hard, I don't know, in on these books that didn't work for me in 2024. If you're liking the vibe, I would encourage you to subscribe, stick around, and without any further rambling on, let's go ahead and get into the meat of this video. My first category is most disappointing. We're starting with a brand new release entitled We Burn Daylight by Brett Anthony Johnston. Now, this book juggles an ambitious mix of elements that had me intrigued early on. A cult, a podcast, young lovers, and a siege. Now, on paper, this is the setup that is brimming with potential. But while the book sparks intrigue early on, it seems to fizzle just as the action begins to come together, and it ends on a truly sour note that left me more burned than illuminated. A couple of classics that really burned me: The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie by Muriel Spark. Now, this classic has plenty of promise because it blends two topics that I absolutely love: teaching and Calvinism. Enter Miss Brodie, who is an eccentric teacher that takes her role of shaping young minds way too far. It's like she's auditioning for the role of God, to be honest. The story gets increasingly weird as Miss Jean Brodie meddles in her students' lives to the point of almost ick. Now, even though the twist at the end was quite satisfying, it left me with the big question unanswered. Why is this book, of all Sparks' work, the one we keep reading? Since we're on the topic of books I wonder why everyone keeps on reading, enter The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. This is the quintessential sad girl book, which unfortunately turned me into a sad girl, not because I found it moving, but because I had to keep on reading it. Bleak without purpose, dreary without charm. It's a classic that I just can't wrap my mind around. Why this book continues to resonate is as baffling of an experience as actually slugging through it. We've entered the category of too much, where the author well and truly over-egged the pudding. The first book, I have a story that relates to it, a very quick anecdote. When my brother and I were tall enough to ride a roller coaster, we were at the boardwalk with the Big Dipper, and we went so early in the morning, and during a week that was so much the off-season for tourists that when we rode the ride and it finished, which I loved, but my brother absolutely hated, the person who ran the ride, I actually don't know who that person is called, who sets the roller coaster in motion, he saw that there was nobody else in line and saw that me and my siblings, my brother and my older sister, were the only ones riding it. And he said, why don't we just have you go again and push the button for the roller coaster to start again? Meanwhile, my brother was just about to eke out the word no as he was set to go on this roller coaster all over again, an experience that he already despised. So much like a roller coaster that you are not quite ready to board, so is this book To Sleep in a Sea of Stars by Christopher Paolini. Now, we're kind of easing in gently here because I actually quite liked this book, but it isn't without its flaws. Much like the title, the book was overlong. The story is set in the distant future, and we're following this main character, Kira, who is exploring a deserted island, and she comes in contact with something. I'm being intentionally vague here. And from that point, just like that roller coaster going off again and my brother wanting to get off of it, the plot is like that because it is a roller coaster that you don't have the option of exiting unless you've DNF'd the book, which I didn't want to. The pacing is actually so relentless that I was praying for downbeats just so I could catch my breath. And while Paolini manages to wrangle a wildly ambitious story into coherence, it left me feeling action sick from the ride much like my brother all those years ago. Next up, When We Lost Our Heads, a try-hard writer determined to make every scene as dark and quippy as humanly possible. The Amazing Adventures of Amina al-Sarafi by Shannon Chakraborty. For the first half of the book, there's this beautiful blend of magical world building, complex characters, and an intriguing plot. But about halfway through, Chakraborty cranks the fantasy elements up to an 11, proving that more magic doesn't necessarily make the story more magical. The Wife by Meg Wolitzer, who makes a grave mistake. She smothers her story with a sledgehammer of a message. It was so rough. It was rough. The Safekeep by Yael van der Wouden. This was one of 2 obligatory Booker reads for me. I really should learn my lesson, but I haven't. This turned a watered-down plot into a steamy shower of a book. It was both odd and jarring, and not in a good way. I'm just remembering the experience of these books, and I can't help but make a sour face. We've entered the awful category, and the first one is Lone Women by Victor Lavelle. This is a historical fiction meets horror book about a woman running from her past, and she has a trunk that she is not supposed to open because, gosh, what's in that trunk? Now, really, so many things were terrible about this book, but really the plot holes in it were the most egregious errors that Lavelle had, mostly because when you really got said and done with the plot and you looked at it, it looked as if you were looking through a cheesecloth. I partially blame myself for the train wreck that this book ended up being in my life. The book is The Fraud by Zadie Smith. Now, this book is set in Victorian England, a time period that I really like and had so much promise, which was probably my first mistake. My next mistake is that Zadie Smith is one of those authors that I've desired, yearned, wanted to meet on the page for years and years and years. Ever since her book, White Teeth, published in 2000, took the literary world by storm when Smith was a mere 25 years old. I've just known that she's an author that I want to know. And finally, when Scott, my frenemy of the channel Gunpowder Fiction and Plot, when he hated this book, and he and I traditionally have opposite takes on most books, to be honest, when he had an awful takedown of this book, I thought, my gosh, this book is for me. Well, Scott was right. That is a tremendously difficult pill to swallow right now, because the story is about Eliza, who is a woman working for her cousin, I believe, and becomes extremely interested in a trial about a fraud. But then Smith takes a 150-page detour that was so heavy-handed, it was practically screaming, "Look at this." And from that point on, the book was just excruciating. I really should learn my lesson about prizes, because my next book was the obligatory women's prize read. Now, I do go in with the best of intentions, trying to pick a book that I'm going to love, but I did a terrible job this year. And this year's obligatory women's prize read was Ordinary Human Failings by Megan Nolan, a book with promise, but fell flat. Actually, really, the whole thing was forgettable, that I had to look up what the plot was to remind myself what I didn't like about the plot. And even now, having done all that looking up, and even after having read the book is actually fading in my mind. The worst book of the year, I felt tricked, lied to, because it made so many people's best books of the year. It made it to the Reader's Choice of the best books of the 21st century, according to the New York Times' readers. I went in thinking, this is a book I must read. This is a book with such promise. It's going to change my life. It's going to be amazing. And I got in there and I was shocked at this atrocity, essentially. my worst book of the year, the worst book of the year, is indeed Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. It was about as subtle as Sesame Street, as nuanced as a neon light, and as predictable as Peter Pan. It was like the world had never seen a male and female be friends before. It was like, because Zevin wrote about the video gaming world, that she automatically got some sort of cred. No, y'all. It was terrible. It was condescending and overly nostalgic. It read like the results of a John and Hank Green writing workshop. It was just that bad. So I'm just here to do what I normally don't do and speak truth to power, the power of the collective internet that love this book, and that I just simply don't understand why we cannot all see the forest for the trees. Anyways, I'm going to stop. I'm sure I'm like babbling at this point, but let's all trauma bond together and leave your worst books of the year in the comment section down below. We'd love to know what you did not get along with. And now I'm gonna go. So hopefully I will see you all in my next one. Bye.